Hi, my name is Kenlyn Henry, and this is my final paper presentation for Anth 242, Historical Trauma Among the Yupik Peoples of Alaska. The Yupik people of Alaska suffered immense trauma that led to many major issues they face today. It includes alcoholism, suicide, and depression. I am a Yupik woman from Southwest Alaska, and I see and experience the results of the trauma that was inflicted on my Yupik ancestors. In this paper, I talk about the trauma faced by the Yupik people and the results of the Great Death. Before the Western people arrived, the Yupik people were alone on their homelands, and they were ruled by their customs, traditions, and spiritual beliefs of their own people. The Yupik are the most culturally diverse group of Alaska Native people. There are three main groups of Yupik languages: the Siberian Yupik, Central Yupik, and the Alutiiq. The Yupik people had strong family relationships and depended on each other for survival and community hunting. The Yupik people gathered and hunted off the land to survive. They were deeply connected with their environment. The Yupik people walked out to the tundra and launched their kayaks into the river or the Bering Sea. That's where they entered into their spiritual realm. Going out to the tundra or the river is always extremely relaxing and mind-clearing. The different environments they lived on provided different types of animals and resources. They hunted large sea mammals, fish, and caribou, and gathered berries like salmon, blue, and black. The Yupik people's world was complete. They called it Yuyagak, the way of the human being. Yuyagak defined the correct way of thinking and speaking about living things. It outlined the protocol for every and any situation that human beings might find themselves in. They had everything they needed to live in harmony. The Yupik people held different ceremonial rituals for different events. They danced with masks and held different feasts such as the Messenger Feast and the Bladder Feast. They danced and sang for different occasions, and their dances often told a story using masks and other objects. Angalkuk's shamans were the village historians, physicians, judges, arbitrators, and interpreters of Yuyagak. They also understood the spiritual world. They were highly respected and even sometimes feared. They held the highest positions in the village. The stories that were told by a Yupik teacher in elementary schools, and some of the stories my grandma Emma would tell me about Angalkuks, that they were able to heal any sickness with their hands, and they can also put curses on people. People would say there was a local woman in my village that was an Angalkuk that had put a curse on a woman in her village. I would not be able to confirm it was true or not. The Central Yupik people believed in Tlumyo, which was a universal cosmic presence who coordinated existence and established a basic ordering framework. The Yupik people believed all things had a yo, or a spiritual essence. Although the Yupik people's world was complete, they were not alone any longer. When the Westerners arrived, the Yupik people were not very interested with them, but the Yupik people quickly adopted their technology and goods. It is estimated that there were approximately 19,500 Yupik people at contact by the Europeans. Although the Yupik people's contacts with the Europeans occurred at a later time for Alaska Native people, the contact with the Western people was devastating. They suffered and died from diseases, widespread epidemics that shamans were not able to cure. They helplessly watched as their people died from tuberculosis, influenza, and measles. It caused a tremendous reduction in population. The Yupik people had no immunity and lost 60% of their people. The Great Death wiped out villages and it gave birth to orphans who are now our current grandparents and great-grandparents. The survivors of the Great Death lost their families and friends and were not able to help in any way. The period of the Great Death among the Yupik people is vague because there is no oral or written record of the reaction to the Great Death. But one can only imagine the hurt and loneliness the survivors must have felt when they lost life as they knew it. The death of the Yupik people also took a great part of Yuyok with them. The survivors were now a new generation of Yupiks, the first generation of modern-day Yupik. The survivors were in shock, confused, heartbroken, and afraid. The entire culture of the Yupik people has changed. The orphans and the survivors were sent to orphanages that eventually turned into Christian schools. The orphanages were turned into boarding schools and parents were threatened with jail if they did not give up their children to get a proper education. The Yupik people no longer lived their old ways and readily followed the white missionaries and school teachers. My grandma said her older siblings had to attend school at St. Mary's, but she was the only one who didn't attend. The Yupik people gave up their ways and began depending on handouts from federal and state governments. The priests and missionaries convinced the scared and traumatized survivors that their old culture was satanic. This resulted in the disappearance of Yupik dances and feasts. The surviving Yupik people lost their families in devastating numbers and did not understand why. They were confused and the events were too traumatic to speak about and they refused to speak about them at all. One elder said, "I hear that the missionaries call their peoples heathens, devil worshippers, and everything we did came from the devil. So when those activities stopped, it affected our people pretty hard. And I think that's why the people I saw, like my dad and some people his age before him, older people, abused drinking." The children of the survivors inherited the symptoms of silence and minimizing problems and pretending they are not affected. They were not taught about their culture because it was hard to do so. Since the children of the survivors did not understand why they feel loneliness, heartbreak, and confusion, they blame themselves for the feelings they feel. The children began to feel there was something wrong with them and their own people. They became ashamed, passive, aggressive, and quiet. They lost a sense of their being, and they did not know who they were anymore. Traditional dependence changed to European dependence. Since the 1960s, there has been a dramatic rise in alcohol abuse, alcoholism, and violent behaviors. Because the survivors were hurt, they quickly became addicted to it. It was a way to numb themselves from the pain. Under the influence, they begin to vent out their suppressed feelings, and it comes out in anger. Many Yupik men do not know how to communicate their feelings to one another, and it has become custom to their culture. The Yupik people have become keepers of their own feelings, and they keep to themselves without sharing or expressing how they feel. Alcohol and other substances increase the chances of crime, death, and injury among the Yupik people. This includes the high rate of suicide among Yupik people. The statistics of Alaska Native suicides is high for much of Alaska, but they are exceedingly high in the areas inhabited by the Yupik people. It is not uncommon to hear about suicide or suicide attempts in young teens in rural communities. In order to fight the issues we face today, we must heal the deep wounds the great death brought to the Yupik culture. The Yupik people must begin the healing process and take back their culture and begin to embrace who they are again. We must help the Yupik people because the system they are living in now is killing them. There have been efforts in combating the epidemics the Yupik people face today, but there have been little to no success in healing the Yupik people from the trauma their ancestors faced. It is suggested that instead of focusing on the individual, healing must include the family and family systems. Family relationships need to be core essentials for the Yupik people. Strengthening relationships and family ties need to be part of the healing process because it will bring back focus to what was once dear to the Yupik people. Honest communication from the heart will break down the inability to share one's heart and feelings. Healing needs to take place in a family level and community level. There is a program with behavioral health that is culturally relevant and culturally related intervention that helps people in the YK Delta.